What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my early thoughts ahead of game week 12. So, I've got a big discussion about Liverpool players, whether any of them are worth bringing in ahead of their great fixture. And I'm also going to talk about Dijk versus Konate, some other players as well from different teams, and go through some notes from the weekend. So let's get into it. So let's start with some early thoughts on Liverpool players. They're about to come into a really good fixture run over the next 8 game weeks. Quick reminder of what that fixture run is. Forest at home in 12. Then you've got West Ham away in 13, Sunderland at home in the midweek game week for 14, then Leeds away, Brighton at home, Spurs away, Wolves at home, Leeds at home. Really great fixture run the whole way through. Not many games there you'd be massively worried about. Maybe if you had a Liverpool defender, you wouldn't want to play them against Spurs away, but even then it's not the end of the world. And from an attacking point of view, it's good the whole way through. No issues there whatsoever. The problem is, I'm not convinced there's that many options we should actually be looking at. Now, I'm going to talk about Dijk and Konate specifically in a second in another section, but for everyone else, it almost feels like it's quite hard to justify. So take Alisson, for example, in goal. He's 5.4 million, so he's cheaper than Raya and Donnarumma, which is quite nice, and he might drop to 5.3 million before the game week 12 deadline. But we've got a goalkeeper here that's a little bit injury prone, and maybe saying injury prone is a bit harsh, but it does feel like every season he picks up 1 or 2 knocks and is out for a few weeks. And the problem is, we're coming up to a period of FPL where we've got a lot of game weeks in quick succession. There's a busy period over Christmas. If he was to pick up another injury, you're going to miss a lot of games. You're going to be forced into a transfer straight away. Now, he is a goalkeeper, so you don't expect them to get injured that much. But with Alisson, it does once or twice a season. It does seem to happen. So if you're on wildcard and you want to go for it, because it's a cheap way into the Liverpool defence for a player that's absolutely nailed, again, I don't hate it. But the idea of using a transfer to bring him in, I'm not so sure. I would probably just go cheap like Petrovic or Verbruggen, someone like that, and just spend the money elsewhere. So Alisson's fine, but I really don't think he's much more than that. Szoboszlai, 6.6 million. I don't mind him, but he is on 4 yellow cards now. Now, you could look at it and say the fixture run is so good, it doesn't matter if he gets suspended because he's always going to come back to another good game. And I think that is fair enough. And if you've got a squad that's got a lot of depth, and you've got cheap defenders on the bench that can get you defensive contributions, etc., if they have to be played, it's not the end of the world. But I also just think, is Szoboszlai that good that I need to risk it? You know, like he's perfectly reasonable as a pick. He's playing in midfield now, so you'd expect the attacking numbers to go up because they haven't been great so far, but a lot of those matches were at right back. So he's playing in midfield. He's a big differential. He's playing 90 minutes every game. 6.6, not bad. And I think when you look at the 6 to 7 million bracket, the options are actually getting a bit smaller. Like Njai and Enzo, I think are fine to hold, but I'm not sure I'd buy them. Sarr's good if you don't have him. Wolves away, Man United at home, Burnley away, but then it's AFCON. Sorry, then it's Fulham away, City at home, then it's AFCON. So Fulham away, City at home, then he's gone. It's not amazing, but I think Sarr's okay to buy this week. Other 6 to 7 million, that, you know, Kudus, nobody wants him right now. Grealish, Everton fixtures aren't great. That's why I wouldn't buy Njai. So Szoboszlai from that point of view is good, but it's just the 4 yellow cards. If you've got a squad that is not going to cope very well with a suspension, I probably just wouldn't buy him. But everyone else, maybe you can risk it. I don't mind him whatsoever. I like players that play every single game for 90, especially when they're playing now in midfield. Gakpo, I just think is a non-option. He's just been benched twice in a row. And not only has he been benched, it's against Real Madrid and Man City. Huge games, and Slot has not picked him in either one. Now, you could look at that Man City game and say, well, they lost 3-0 fairly comfortably. Maybe he changes things up. Maybe he does. But for how long? And the problem with the Liverpool setup right now is the midfield is Szoboszlai, Gravenberch, McAllister. I don't think he's going to mess with that. I don't think we're going to see Wirtz coming back in as a 10 and then one of Szoboszlai or McAllister have to drop out. Maybe if Bradley was to get injured, that would happen so Szoboszlai can play right back. But I think most people would say the Villa and Real Madrid games went quite well with that midfield. So I think that sticks. That means to get Wirtz in the team, you've got to play him somewhere else. Right wing's always going to be Salah until he goes to African Cup of Nations, but that's not till game week 17. Up front is presumably always going to be one of Isak or Ekitike. So you've got one spot for Gakpo and Wirtz. And by the way, Wirtz has started the last 2 games. He wasn't particularly great against Man City, but there's a reason that Slot didn't start Gakpo as well. So for 7.5 million, I think you just spend that money elsewhere. Like Gakpo's underlying numbers, expected goals per 90, expected assists, really good. Very similar to Mbeumo, by the way. The difference is Mbeumo will play every single game. Nobody has taken his spot in that Man United team. With Gakpo, we've literally seen his spot taken twice in a row. Now, Gakpo's obviously cheaper by $1 million, but I would probably go cheaper and just spend the money elsewhere than get Gakpo right now. And if someone said to me, I'm just going to take the punt for the fixtures, don't hate it. But 13, 14, 15 is weekend, midweek, weekend. There's Champions League games as well. Gakpo's going to play minutes. He has to. There will be rotation, but that's the problem with you don't want rotation, right? You want a player like Szoboszlai that's going to play every game. So for me, I will not look at Gakpo whatsoever. I don't care how good the fixtures are, how good your underlying numbers are. You need minutes on the pitch, otherwise how do you get returns? So not for me. Ekitike and Isak, they're just competing with each other, so I just can't go there. Isak's probably first choice when fully fit. I think most people would agree with that. But Ekitike is going to get minutes. Isak's going to get subbed early. He's not on penalties like he was at Newcastle. And he's 10.4 million. Nobody can justify that to me. Not a single person can make a case why you should pay 10.4 for Isak. Because even when they start trying to do that, I'd rather spend less money on Saka in midfield and change I'd much rather have Saka in midfield than Isak up front. Simple as that. And maybe this all changes when Salah goes to AFCON and there's one less attacker to be in that team. But no one really knows how they're going to set up. I know a lot of people will talk about Frimpong playing right wing. Maybe that happens. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe he just doesn't play well there. Maybe Gakpo gets put out there, or Szoboszlai goes and plays a bit of a different role out wide. Not like Salah, I get it, right? Maybe he covers that. I don't know. But you can't do it before then. And then we come on to Salah. I think it's really hard to make the case for him at 14.2 million. The problem is, it's not that I think he's a bad pick necessarily in isolation, because he'll play all the minutes for these games. And we know what he can deliver. We've seen it many times in the past. The problem is how you get him in. So for most people, you either sell Haaland, which absolutely nobody wants to do right now, or you find 4 million or 5 million to upgrade your Mbeumo, Fernandes, Saka spot to Salah. It just doesn't feel worth it. The other reason it feels less viable is because of how his game weeks match up to other players. So if you really want to go against Haaland for captaincy, it's game weeks 12, 14, 16, when Haaland is away to Newcastle, Fulham and Palace. And by the way, if you want to captain Haaland in those games, absolutely fine. But if you were going to go against him, it's the away games, right? 12, 14, 16, Salah's got Forest at home, Sunderland at home, Brighton at home. Pretty good. But you don't want to sell Haaland to do it, because in 13, 15 and 17, Haaland's the best captain against Leeds, Sunderland, West Ham. Now you could sell Haaland to Salah in 12, free hit Haaland back in for 13, have Salah for captaincy against Sunderland in 14, then buy Haaland back in 15. The problem with that is 4 transfers guaranteed. And yes, I know we're coming up to a period where we've got to get our transfers used, but you're doing everything with those 4 moves just to get Haaland out, Salah in, and then back again. So if anything else crops up, you might get stuck, and you're going to lose team value. Like for me, Haaland's just gone up to 14.9 million last night. If I sell him and want to buy him back, that's 0.4 million I'm going to lose. And I will lose that because, one, I 100% want to buy him back because he's too good for captaincy later on. Even if I free hit 13, I definitely want him back for 15 and 17. And nobody else is going to sell him. So his price is not going to drop. Maybe it drops to 14.8, but I just don't see anyone selling him. The other issue with Salah, like why it's less important to get him in for those captaincy weeks, is Man United and Arsenal also have good fixtures in 12, 14 and 16. They match up perfectly to Liverpool. So Saka, Spurs at home, Brentford at home, Wolves at home, Bruno Fernandes or Mbeumo, Everton at home, West Ham at home, and then Bournemouth at home in 16. So if Man United and Arsenal, like Saka and Mbeumo, etc., that people might be looking at for captaincy, had really great weeks the same weeks as Haaland, and Salah was the only one, that had good captaincy in other weeks, maybe you'd look at him more, but that's not even the case. It's just too hard to justify. I don't think many people have got a squad where they can easily get to Salah without selling Haaland. If you're on wildcard and you want to go it, don't mind it at all. Huge differential. But for everyone else that's not doing with the wildcard, I just don't think you can. I don't think you can justify it. And for that reason, I would probably just ignore him. So I look at all these players here. Like Conor Bradley, fine. But again, another player I don't expect to play fit. He just cannot play, in my opinion, for a long time or a long period of time. Weekend, midweek, weekend, etc. Just don't think he can do it. So the value's there, but I would just buy Konate or Van Dijk instead. And Szoboszlai, maybe risk the 4 years. That's the only player I'm looking at from this list is Szoboszlai. Isak, Gakpo, Ekitike will get nowhere near my team without injuries. Vert's non-starter. And I mean non-starter as an FPL pick because he's literally started the last two. And Salah's it's just too much money. So it feels wrong. Look at those fixtures. Look at how good Liverpool have been. Look how good they can be. But from an FPL point of view, sometimes the team with the best fixtures is not the one to buy players from. And that's how I feel about Liverpool right now. So there are two players from Liverpool that people might be considering, and that's Van Dijk and Konate. The reason I left them as a separate discussion is because they might actually find their way into people's squads. I think the other players are a little bit more punty in general, but I won't get into that again. Van Dijk, 5.9 million, Konate, 5.4 million. Defensively, Liverpool not quite been on it so far this season, but the fixtures are too good to not get clean sheets. I think if nearly every other team in the league had these fixtures, maybe not Wolves, but most other teams, you'd maybe consider a defender if the price was right and it fit into your squad. So I think for Liverpool, we shouldn't completely write them off. In terms of defensive contributions, Konate will get some at times. He's not bad for them at all. And actually, his goal threat so far this season has been slightly better than Van Dijk. His expected goals per 90, 0.07, Van Dijk 0.03. So not much in it. The thing is, Van Dijk will pick up defensive contributions at a higher rate than Konate. At least that's what we've seen so far. On average per start, Van Dijk is 10.64, Konate is 8.36. So Van Dijk's slightly better. I know there's some games where Van Dijk got like over 20, so it's a little bit skewed. But either way, Van Dijk probably the better option for Defcons. And also, I know over the 11 games we've had so far, Konate's numbers say he's been the bigger goal threat. But if I told you that Liverpool centre-back had scored a goal, you're going to think it's Van Dijk straight away. Right, we all know he's the bigger goal threat from set pieces on average. Like he's already scored a few in the Champions League. The goal against City, in my opinion, should have counted. Konate's just not the one from set pieces that you really see Liverpool targeting. It doesn't mean that he never gets on the end of a cross, because of course he does. But Van Dijk's got the bigger goal threat, and he's better for defensive contributions. And by the way, if Slot at any point over this congested fixture makes a change at centre back, it's never going to be Van Dijk. We all know that. I'm not necessarily expecting Joe Gomez to come in because he's hardly played any minutes whatsoever for Liverpool. But if someone needed a rest, it's Konate more than Van Dijk. So I personally think if you're going to buy a defender, you should try and find the 0.5 million for Van Dijk. I think he's just a better all-round pick. But if someone wanted to go Konate, there is every chance he just plays all these games if he can stay fit. Because that's what we've seen all season. And they don't really have much depth in this department of centre-back, right? They should have got Gay in the summer, etc. So yeah, I think Konate is fine if you're struggling for cash. But if you're sat there with 5.9 million, I think there's zero justification to go Konate. I think Van Dijk, and it doesn't mean that Konate won't outscore Van Dijk, but I think if we're trying to make a prediction, Van Dijk is the one. And I like him, by the way. If it's Van Dijk versus an Arsenal defender, it's hard to justify going Van Dijk. But at least you know he'll play all these matches. 13, 14, 15, you got a midweek game in between. Then you get to the Christmas period where the game weeks come a bit faster. Having someone like Van Dijk's quite nice. And if they don't get the defensive returns, okay, it's going to be annoying, but the fixtures are too good, surely. And he's got the goal threat. So I quite like him as a pick. I think he's quite competitive to like Timber, Canafori, etc. So yeah, I like him. Konate's fine, but I really don't see myself looking at him at all over this period. So Thiago at Brentford is just a really good pick, isn't he? Another couple of goals at the weekend, including a penalty, 6.3 million. He'll definitely be 6.4 by the game week 12 deadline. He's playing lots of minutes. He's absolutely nailed in that number 9 position, and the fixtures are quite good. So basically, if you want to go and buy Thiago, I absolutely would. The only thing I would say is, don't feel like you've got to be in a panic to get him, because it's going to feel like everyone's buying him. You've got to bring him in. I don't think that's necessarily the case, especially if you're going to free hit in game week 13. Because if you're going to do that, you can get him for Burnley at home anyway. And outside of that, it's actually 3 away games in the next 4. Now, individually, apart from Arsenal away, it's not a huge problem. If you've got Thiago and you've got to play him against Brighton away, not a problem. If you've got Thiago, you've got to play him against Spurs away in 15, not a problem. But if you're free hit 13, Brighton away, Arsenal away, Spurs away, I wouldn't be in such a rush necessarily to have to bring him in. So if you need a forward that's cheap, he's your one, right? If you want to restructure to a 3-4-3 to get Thiago in alongside Haaland, Mateta, whoever it might be, absolutely fine. But I think if you're on free hit 13, that's the only strategy where, okay, I can maybe get away with it until game week 16. And that's what I'm thinking with my own team, is maybe when I get to game week 16 and I've got 5 free transfers, maybe I use 2 of them to shift some funds from midfield back to forwards. So, yeah, I like him. I think the more interesting discussion longer term will be if you stick to a 3-5-2, or basically if you stick to a structure where you've only got 2 forwards up front, should it just be Haaland and Mateta? Or later on, is there worthwhile to move Mateta to Thiago and go even cheaper up front? Because from what I've looked at on future moves, when I get to 15 and I want to get all my transfers used, and then I get to game week 16 and I've got 5 from the top up for AFCON, there's lots of midfielders I wouldn't mind taking punts on to move around, not so much with the forwards. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a conversation for another video about longer term moves. But basically, Thiago good, especially if you're not free hit 13, because you get that Burnley game and Brighton away is fine. And in 14, maybe you can bench him. I think a lot of people will have good teams in game week 14. Nothing bad to say about the guy. 84 minutes per start, on penalties, decent goal threat. It's what you want. So speaking of players that continue to go up in price, Bryan Mbeumo is now 8.5 million, only 0.4 million cheaper than Bruno Fernandes. And do you know what? He's just a really good pick. And I know everybody already knows that, but sometimes it's nice just to remind yourself that he is just decent. Like, obviously, he will go to African Cup of Nations, and that will be a problem later on. And it'll be a massive problem for Man United, by the way. But I don't think we're at the stage yet where you don't buy a player because of AFCON. Because you've got at least 5 game weeks from him, maybe 6. There is some talk going around that Man United will try and negotiate with Cameroon to allow him to play the game week 17 fixture against Villa away, because his first match of AFCON is not for a couple of days later. I don't know if that will actually happen, but you know he'll play 16. So you've got at least 5 game weeks out of him, and it's a good fixture run for United. The hardest fixture is probably Palace away in 13, but that's after a European match. Now, it's never easy to go away to Palace, but if you're going to play them, it's after they've played on the Thursday. So Everton at home, not bad. Then Palace away after Europe. West Ham at home, great fixture. Wolves away, great fixture. And right now, Bournemouth at home doesn't look that bad either. So if you want to go for him, go for it. 86 minutes per start on average. There is nobody that's going to come into that Man United team and take his place. He's going to start every single game just like Bruno. 0.31 expected goals per 90, 0.24 expected assists. Like I said earlier, very similar to Gakpo. The difference is Mbeumo will always play. Do I think he's the better pick than Bruno? I mean, from open play, yes. There's no contest there whatsoever. Could Bruno get a penalty or 2 over this run? Potentially. Could he pick up defensive contributions, which are worth nearly almost as much as an assist? Possibly. Is he very good for bonus when he gets a return? Yes. Like, there is a world where Fernandes outscores Mbeumo over the next 5, and obviously it saves you a transfer down the line. But I think most people are just looking at it saying, game week 16, I'm going to get 5 transfers, so who cares? I think that's fair. I guess for those looking for a differential, Mbeumo's ownership's quite high now. And Fernandes is a permanent differential because no one likes him. But yeah, it's getting harder and harder to make the case for Bruno. Simple as that. But with 0.4 million difference and a long-term hold, there's a slight case to go there. But either way, if you want Mbeumo, completely get it. And there is 0 negatives about him, really. And you can make a case that there's better value picks out there. But actually, those 6 to 7 million midfielders, like I said earlier, I think the options are getting less and less now. So a few people are looking at O'Reilly from Man City, 4.9 million left back, playing really well at the moment, averaging 87 minutes per start. Also, when you watch him, he just gets into the box so often. It feels like he's constantly getting shots. Now, obviously, he's not getting as much as Haaland, etc. But 0.12 expected goals per 90, not bad. Not bad for a left back whatsoever, especially one priced under 5 million. And he started a lot of games recently. My concern, as ever, though, is he's a Man City player. And part of the reason he started recently is, 1, he's playing really well, but 2, Aït-Nouri's been injured, and Aït-Nouri is back now. So is O'Reilly going to start all these games coming up? Is there going to be rotation in one of 13, 14, 15, especially with Champions League and stuff around it as well? There has to be, right? O'Reilly's not going to play all those games when Aït-Nouri was brought in to play left back. So that's my worry with him. You could argue that for less than 5 million, even if he misses 1 game of the next 6, or even 2 maybe, that's okay. But I don't know if it is these days because of defensive contributions. I honestly think defensive contributions have made it much tougher to go for punts like this. Now, if he misses a game and misses it completely and doesn't sub on, that's fine, right? You get someone off your bench and maybe that defender is a defensive contribution player. But what if there's a scenario where he does come on? That's just pain, right? 1 point pain when you could have got someone a bit more, I don't know, that can be relied on, right? That you know is definitely going to start. So I would, look, the fixture run is really good from game week 13. I can see why it's a tempter, but I would maybe just come back to it in game week 17, which feels ages away, I know, but then 8 Nuri will be at African Cup of Nations. And then maybe O'Reilly gets that run again where he just starts every game. And the fixtures are not bad game week 17 onwards. The other thing to point out, Vardiol and Ake can both play left back as well. So there's like 4 players that can play that position. Now, the way that Pep keeps setting up, I don't think that Vardiol and Ake are going to play left back that much, if not at all. But it's just always the same conversation with City. So I don't mind him. But honestly, if I was picking between him and a 4.5 like Richards or Anderson, that I know is going to start, that can get me DEFCONs, it just feels wrong this season to go against the more reliable pick. It's such a similar conversation with Jeremy Doku, who people are looking to bring in this week. Only 6.4 million, so a nice price. Played really well against Liverpool, man of the match, took his goal well. Only 5.1% overall ownership, so huge differential. And the fixtures coming up are great, especially from an attacking point of view. But you cannot rely on his minutes. Even when he started, he's only averaged 75 minutes per start. And you don't even know if he's going to start every game. And the funny thing is, I thought, okay, Marmoush is only just back recently, so Doku's had a run of starts in the team. Maybe that just means he keeps his place for a while, and maybe for 6.4 million it's worth the punt. But actually, he hasn't been starting every game recently, even with Marmoush injured. So he got 73 minutes against Liverpool, 72 against Bournemouth, was benched before that against Villa in game week 9, 58 minutes against Everton in game week 8, and he didn't start against Brentford either. And I went back and checked that Brentford game. It was Semenyo on the left and Bob on the right. So even with like injuries to Marmoush, you could absolutely play from the left. Doku hasn't been started every game. It's like a constant same conversation with Man City players. You just cannot trust it. Could you take the punt because he's only 6.4? Absolutely. Ask yourself the question, what are you going to do the first game he gets benched? Presumably, you're going to ask me whether you should sell him. Or you're going to think about selling, or you're going to ask someone else. Or obviously, you don't have to ask me. I just couldn't do it. I just look at it and think he's playing really well, and that doesn't matter because Pep will just mix it up. Do you think Doku's going to start 13, 14, 15? Which is, let me just double check. Man City spacing might be okay. So Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. There's no way he starts both of those games, I don't think. And also, by the way, Man City are kind of, I know it sounds stupid to say this after they've just won 3-0, but they're kind of struggling for goals a little bit outside of Haaland. The player in their squad that's probably the next best goal scorer is Marmoush. Like, surely when they can get him fully fit, he's going to play minutes. I couldn't buy Doku for 6 points. I hate players that you can't guarantee a start from. You know that if you watch my videos for a while. And even with some of the injuries City have had, this guy's still not started all the games. I just wouldn't go there. Let's talk about Semenyo next. Lots of people wondering what to do with him. His ownership is absolutely massive at 64.3%. And his output has dipped recently. And obviously he's missed that penalty at the weekend as well. I think this is an interesting discussion because anytime a player overperforms, I always mention it. And then I'll say something like it's just a case of when will that overperformance stop? And sometimes it goes on for ages. Look at Chris Wood last season. For Semenyo, it stopped pretty quickly. Because if you look at his expected goals per 90, 0.28, which is not terrible for a player that always plays close to 90 minutes, but it's not amazing either. But his actual goals per 90, 0.55. Expected assists per 90, 0.05. Actual assists, 0.36. So he's gotten quite lucky to get the points he's had, and now the output has started to dip. Does that mean you've got to sell him straight away? No. Primarily because it's West Ham at home. Now, I would, with any decision you make about Semenyo moving forward, assume that he's not going to take penalties. We don't know if he'll definitely be off them because Kluivert wasn't on the pitch when they got that penalty at the weekend. But I suspect if they are both on the pitch, Kluivert will definitely take the next one because his record's pretty good. If Kluivert's off the pitch, which he often is, will it be Semenyo, will it be Evan Nilsson? We'll have to wait and see. I suspect Semenyo might get the next one, but I would just assume he's not going to take any penalties. So do you want to keep him without penalties? I think you probably should for West Ham at home. And also, Sunderland away in 13, Everton at home in 14 are not awful either. So I would say give him at least one more game, maybe 3, and then decide what to do with him. He does have Burnley at home in 17, but before that it's Chelsea at home, Man United away. And that's the period where you're going to want to really start using transfers. So I've already looked, and maybe in game week 15, I'll sell into a different midfielder as a punt, or maybe redistribute the funds into the forward line. That's maybe where you go and buy Thiago. So Semenyo was never going to keep up the run of returns he got early on in the season. It's just a case of how long would it last for. In this case, not very long, but I still don't think he's a terrible pick. And the fact he's got West Ham at home makes him such a hard sell right now. Should you buy him? I think there's a case to be made that you can still buy him if you've got the money. But at 8.1 million, I'd much rather go and buy Mbeumo for 0.4 if you can afford it. So just some other notes from the weekend. For Newcastle, Nick Pope was subbed with concussion, so presumably he'll be back for game week 12. But if you're an owner, just wait and see what Eddie Howe says in the press conference next week. Gordon missed out completely. Apparently it's a hip problem. It doesn't seem like a major issue, but if you've got him, he probably needs to go anyway. Dan Burn got a red card, so he'll miss the next game. Whether or not you should sell him depends on whether you can cover him for a week, basically, and if you want to hold him longer term. I think he's still okay-ish to hold, but he's not on my radar at all in terms of buying. So if you want a different defender instead, don't hate it. City, Reinders benched again. He's gone now. Last week, you could make the case, but he hadn't trained all week according to Pep. He really wanted to start him, and so you can make a case to keep hold of him one more week. He's not started again. He's done from an FPL point of view. Foden, 89 minutes in each of the last 6 game weeks. Not bad if you're looking for a Man City attacker punt. Nunez, 90 minutes in each of the last 6, but Kushanov is back soon. So a bit like O'Reilly, I don't fully trust the minutes there. Anderson penalty with Wood, Igor Jesus and Gibbs-White off the pitch and continues to hit 10 defensive contributions minimum a game. He's not got less than 10 in any game so far this season. I quite like him at 5.3. I don't know, like with Wood and Igor Jesus, presumably if they're on the pitch, they will take. It's just about how often they'll be on the pitch at the moment. Chris, I'm not quite sure who the first choice forward is going to be under Sean Dyche when they're all fit. We'll have to wait and see, but presumably whoever it is will take penalties. Gibbs-White's obviously been taking them as well, but he missed in Europe. And interestingly, I was on the Above Average FPL podcast last night, and Baker said there was an interview after the game, which I've seen now, where Gibbs-White was asked about England, and he said he spoke to Tuchel, and Tuchel told him never to take a penalty again. As a joke, of course, and Gibbs-White laughed it off. Maybe Anderson will be ahead of Gibbs-White now. It's possible. So if there's any time where Wood or Jesus are not on the pitch, maybe Anderson does take a penalty. Either way, I wouldn't buy him for that reason. But at 5.3, I said this before the game week, Anderson is basically Caicedo for 0.7 million less. Slightly better attacking numbers, very good for defensive contributions. If you want a player like that, spend 5.3, don't spend 6. Crystal Palace, Gay missed out of the foot injury. Apparently he's got a heavy bone bruise. And Glasner said he can't even walk. So he's going to be a major doubt for game week 12. But again, let's wait and see what Glasner says in his press conference before you will start selling him. Because if he's back, Wolves away, not bad. Burnley away in 14 as well. I'm going to leave that one there. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. I'll be back tomorrow with some early transfer plans as well. I've got one more video planned for Thursday too. And then that'll be it until next week. So yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, I'll catch you soon.